Right, let's start with the prayers. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit and wisdom through generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit and wisdom through generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit through generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment and anger that holds some close and others distant. I pay homage to the Sublime Mother of the victorious ones of the three times, the inexpressible, inconceivable, and indescribable perfection of wisdom, which is unborn, unceasing, and of the nature of space, and which is the object of realization of the self-known primordial wisdom. Okay. All right. First of all, Varda from Israel, she posted a question in the discussion group. So I thought before we start, I'm going to ask you, how could we, or how would you describe the relation between the root of samsara, the root of cyclic existence, and the object of negation? The root of cyclic existence and the object of negation. Are they the same? Initially she wrote, are they the same? And then she slightly edited it. So how would you describe the relationship between the two? The root of cyclic existence and the object of negation. It says, like in the Svatantrika or Prasangika schools, it would be right to say ignorance apprehending the object of negation as true intrinsic existence. Well, forget about the last sentence, first of all. What's the difference between the root of cyclic existence and the object of negation? The object of negation of emptiness. What's the difference?
No, but there is sound.
Ah, there's sound. Okay.
But
all right. So what's the difference? What is, first of all, the root of cyclic existence in the Prasangika school? What is the root of cyclic existence?
To think that everything exists more or less. And to grasp also to an inherent existence.
To grasp at inherent existence.
Could be the I or a phenomenon.
Yeah. Could be grasping at the I as existing. Potential for those afflictions to rise again. But yes, everything comes. Potential for those afflictions to rise again. But yes, everything comes, all the other afflictions arise from this particular mind. Therefore, it's called the root of samsara. Okay. So what is then the relationship to, is it working?
it's now.
Okay, great. What is then the relationship between that and the object of negation? What is the object of negation of emptiness?
I, self-sufficient person. This is the object of negation. That
A self-sufficient person, a self-sufficient, substantially existent person. Is that the object of negation of emptiness?
No, the inherent existent is.
Okay, so it's not a self-sufficient, substantially existent I, but it is what? Inherent existence. So what is the relationship between the ignorance grasping inherent existence and the object of negation of emptiness?
One is the mind and the other one is the object of that mind.
One is the mind, very good, and one is the object of that mind. One exists and the other?
An appearance.
One exists. Do both exist? No.
Mind exists, but
The mind exists, but its object doesn't. Great, very good. That's it. So the relationship is basically one is mind, of course, that misapprehends reality. It perceives phenomena in a way in which they can't exist. And the other is that the object of that mind is that which is being negated. It couldn't be negated if it existed. Okay, great. And then, and I'm really sorry if I forget someone in the discussion group. I remember at Salea and then someone else, there was this kind of a dialogue going on between them, and I wanted to read it, but I actually forgot about it. So I'll do this later. I'll go back to some of the comments you've made. But there's one comment at the very end from Bernd, and it just kind of fits. Picture is steady. What was that? It kind of fits with everything else, or it relates also to Varda's question. Like again, what is the object of negation? What were you talking about? And so what I usually do is, you can read the comment yourself, of course, what he's written, but just kind of explaining it a little bit, because I think it requires some explanation. So what Bernd is basically saying, he's talking about outside of the mind. And he's kind of moving in the right direction, but some points need some clarification. So in the Prasangika school, okay, so when we say mind existing outside, that statement, which is actually, I think he means nothing can exist without mind. That is true. Nothing can exist without mind, right? Can anything exist if there was no mind? Would anything exist? No. Without mind, nothing can exist. But that can be easily misunderstood. In the Prasangika school, it does not mean that things are merely projections of an individual's mind, nor that they exist, that nothing exists outside consciousness. That's also not true. In the Prasangika school, there are things that exist outside of consciousness, right? When we hear nothing exists outside the mind, it can be misunderstood to mean there's no external existence. And according to the Prasangika school, of course there is. There is mind and there are external phenomena. That's one point, that's one aspect, or one fact that is important. So there are external phenomena. We're not saying the table is not there. That would be Chittamatra, saying there's no table out there. That would be a different Buddhist school. That's not the highest school. Okay, so once again, it doesn't mean that things are merely made up by the mind. That's also a common misunderstanding. When we say phenomena are merely labeled, today I call this table a kangaroo, and now it becomes a kangaroo. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but as if labeling things means I'm just making them up and I can decide to call them one thing one day and something else the next day. That's also not what is meant with here. So you see this middle ground. We have to be very careful. Yes, without the mind, nothing could exist, but that doesn't mean the mind creates stuff the way I just said, and it doesn't mean that there are no phenomena external to mind. Okay, so that's one part. Because, well, first of all, that latter position, that moves too close to the Chittamatra school, and the Chittamatra school saying there's only mind and there's nothing out there is rejected by the Prasangika school. So the Prasangika school is very clear. Tables, mountains, other living beings,
they're not just private kind of mental projections. They're not just projections by the mind. They actually exist. But these phenomena do not exist from their own side. Such a weird way of talking. From their own side. In and of themselves. Or maybe simpler, naturally. Naturally in the sense that they don't require anything to just be. They just are. They just are in the sense they don't need anything to exist. Remember? They don't depend on anything to be a table, to be a mountain. We call them tables simply because they are already tables, right? This object, we call that, we would all agree we call this a table. Since there are different languages, you could also sit in the front if you wanted. You can sit in the front, sure. It's cozier if you sit close. No, but the thing is, when it comes to, what was I saying? Oh, when it comes to like natural, when it comes to different languages, yes, we know, we call this a table and someone may call this something else. But that's not the point. The point is, us calling this a table is simply because it is one. That's how it feels. While the Prasangika school says it's only a table because we call it such. Right? It's only an I in relation to my body and mind, or in relation to my mind mainly. It's only an I because I call it such. And I can call it anything. I can call it I can call it whatever, using a different language, Na in Tibetan, for instance. Never mind, but it only exists if we call it that. All right. So that's important. So the existence is therefore, the Prasangika school would say, that phenomena do not exist naturally or independently of certain things. So they're dependent on causes and conditions. They're dependent on their own parts, their own components, but most importantly, they depend on a mind designating them. So when we say that phenomena cannot exist without mind, the main point is not that the mind manufactures them out of nothing, but that phenomena exist only in dependence upon valid designation by mind. So upon their parts, we label table, we label window, we label other things. But the difficulty, this is still pretty simple, but its parts are also labeled. That's important. The parts of the table, they are also labeled. Okay, so what is a part of the label? The surface of the label, the front leg, the leg in the back from my perspective, and so on. So if I take each of these table legs and I start looking at them, well, on the basis of something that is not a table leg, I label table leg. And then I can go on and on forever. The body's easier because each body part has names. So we take the body, okay, I label my body on the basis of this object. It's pretty clear, it's just called my body. I mean, it feels very precise and solid, but on an atomic level, where does my body start and where do the particles around me that are not part of my body end? Impossible to determine. So we already know with modern science, we know as concrete as my body appears, it is not. And so as long as we don't analyze, yes, we can say there is this body. The moment we start analyzing, we start checking where is the body within the body, we won't find it. But just from the point of view of where it starts and where it ends, it's impossible to define, especially on an atomic level. And then we say, okay, so the body is just labeled on the basis of its parts. Limbs, belly, chest, etc. But then what about these parts? Do they exist independent of mind? No. Again, take a leg, right? Take a leg. It's merely labeled. You can take it apart. Can you find the legness within the leg? Its legness? No. Some essence that makes it a leg? No. It's just on the basis of different parts that are not a leg, we label leg. And then we take any part, the knee, for instance, right? Okay, so is there in essence some kind of meanness, K-N-E-E-ness? Can that be found? No, there's no meanness anywhere. It's like you can't find, just on the basis of certain parts that are not the knee, we label, and you can go on endlessly and you never find anything. If you find anything, please give me a call. No, I'm kidding, right? I mean, I assume you won't do this now when you're in your room and you're meditating, right? Just search for something that makes that a knee, that makes that a calf, that makes this, I don't know, a foot and so forth. Can't find it. However, it doesn't mean you've made it up, because when we don't analyze in that way, it still appears. There's still the appearance of certain objects, right? No one can deny that. Since we were born, things appear to us. You may wonder, well, before I designated, they were already there. Well, we've designated in previous lives. We've got all these imprints, designating. So no surprise that certain things will definitely appear to our mind. And then in this life, the whole process of designating starts all over again, but probably very different to a previous life. What we in a previous life labeled as food. So if I was a cow in my previous life, and as a cow, I definitely labeled, grass, stone. I learned that this is grass, or this is a particular type of grass that may make me violently sick. So next time I avoid it. Can watch animals, just as we learn, okay, so this makes me sick and this one doesn't. So there's a process where a distinction takes place, and that is conceptual. So what I labeled food in my previous life as cow Daisy, I'm not labeling in this life as food, that particular grass. So, but I can still do it, and I did this, and I labeled. And I keep labeling because I keep getting to know, meeting new foodstuffs that previously I didn't know it was food. So anyway, the point is that there is always a basis of labeling, and it's not random. So it depends. My labeling depends on that basis, and it depends on what we mean with that label, right? Food means something I can eat. So on that basis, the parts of that particular food substance, in relation to the fact that it can be eaten by myself, I label it food. Rika, go ahead.
I'm wondering about this labeling and this appearance.
Yes.
Because when we would say we all draw a picture of Geshe-la now,
Okay.
we would still have a lot of things in common in what we perceive. Obviously, it's not 100% the same, but how come that this big group of beings perceive things similar, but then other beings perceive something completely different? Is there an explanation for that?
All right. How come we as humans, as assume you mean? Yeah, we as humans see things in a particular way, while, I don't know, a fly somewhere on the wall would not perceive the same. I mean, we don't really know what they perceive, but just having analyzed their eyes, like scientists having analyzed their eyes, we can say with certainty that they see things differently. So how come? How come? Sorry. You've been studying really well. I keep looking at you because... because... why was I born human? Why were you born human? Why were you not born a fly? Well, in this life, in our previous life, just at the time of death, we were fortunate enough to be, for a karmic seed to ripen that was of the human kind. That means our mind connected at the time of conception with a human cell, which survived and grew into a human being. But that also means that our mind is based on a human brain. A human brain. Now, our mind could exist without the human brain in general, but At this point, because of our karma and afflictions, we are bound to this human brain, this human body in general, but more specifically a human brain, which accounts for the sense faculties this human brain enables you or I to have, right? So seeing colors in a particular spectrum, seeing sounds of a particular volume, for instance, or of a particular pitch, right? Very, very high pitched sounds or very low, we won't be able to perceive. So a fly can do that because they were born with a nervous system, at least, a brain possibly. I don't know, do flies have brains? They probably do. But at least the nervous system that enables them to see different things. Does that answer your question? So in a previous life, the fact we were born with this. Now, our mental consciousness is a different matter, but our sense consciousnesses are very much dependent. Our sense consciousnesses are very much dependent on our sense faculties, and these sense faculties are very much dependent on our body, mainly possibly the brain. Does that make sense?
On this level, I understand it, but when we say that these things don't exist intrinsically, it's so interesting how we can still, for example, take a picture of something, and that so many people perceive it. But for example, there's people that have this issue with colors. Some cannot see red and green correctly. Is this also due to karma, that we have a karma to see red and green in a different way, or like we just count all of this as karma?
Well, I'm pretty sure that the fact that some people can only see black and white, for instance, or different shades of gray, that is also that person's individual karma. Definitely, like anything about our body right now has to do with the actions we've accumulated in the past. But saying that they don't exist inherently, well, actually the fact we can see things differently explains why they don't exist inherently. Because if they did exist inherently, we would have to see all the same, right? If they existed in and of themselves and they weren't dependent on us, then it would be very easy to decide. Remember last time we had this discussion about 22 degrees in McLeodganj. Is it hot or is it cold? Right? For someone who comes from a colder area, it's possibly hot. For someone coming up from Delhi after 40 degrees for like, I don't know how long, it's cold. If the temperature in Dharamsala existed in and of itself, that would mean it would exist as an absolute warmth or heat. Let's decide we call it heat, right? It would exist as an absolute heat. It would not exist in relation to something else. So here saying they don't exist inherently is really just saying they don't exist absolutely. They exist only in relation to something else.
But there is a way to measure the temperature 22 degrees.
That is
Whether
true.
we perceive it. So there is like this kind of tricky thing where it feels like it's more inherent because we can measure it on some levels that seems to not individual. Like when I take a picture of something, it feels like it doesn't just come from my mind. This machine can perceive the same thing, and I can identify this picture as the same person.
All right, okay. Yeah, Sina, go ahead.
No, if you take a picture, okay, you can identify it, but someone else would identify it differently. For example, I look a picture of myself from 10 years ago and I know, okay, this is me, for sure. I show it to my nephew who is 6, and he asks me, who is this woman?
All right, so Sina is arguing like seeing a picture, but everyone sees it differently. Sina knows a picture of herself from 10 years ago, that's her, but her nephew doesn't know. But I'm taking up now Sina's, Rika's argument. She's saying, what I think she's saying is there is something objectively there because you have 22 degrees every time. That was the thing about the numbers, right? You have 20, but what does 22 degree even mean? 22, what is that? There's a certain physical reaction of, let's say, if you use, what was it called? In the olden days, they used it when you measure temperature, you used mercury. You used mercury, right? Well, the mercury just reacts, it expands in such a way that it then hits the 22, right? Every time there's a certain room temperature, then the mercury expands to such a degree that for us humans, it hits those 22. But is exactly 22? Does it exactly? I mean, how precise is it exactly? You know, because on a subatomic level, okay, even without going into that. But this is again human-made, isn't it? That's a physical reaction. And as we've heard before, we're not saying there's no external existence, and we're not saying there's no consistency. We're not saying that there are no laws of nature, that Mercury behaves in a certain way, in a certain temperature. Now, I don't know how it works with the digital, what do you call it? Thermometer, yeah. I don't know how it works then, but I'm sure there's some physical, way of explaining this. Therefore, how can I put it? Phenomena are merely labeled. It's interesting that you bring up this way of measuring. Do we always have to label in order for something to be this, that, and the other? That would be a question that often arises. For instance, if I just label this is a table, right? If this is just labeled, table is just labeled, or heat is just labeled, in order for that to be heat or cold, do I always have to label it? Is it not heat or cold if I don't label it?
But we say it has to be perceived by something to exist.
But right now, in this moment, does it have to? So that's a question that comes up a lot. Is it necessary for something to, well, if it only exists because it is labeled by the mind, does that mean in that particular moment when no one labels it, it doesn't exist? No. Why not? Rika, why not? If everyone leaves this room and there's no mind to label this room, does it go out of existence? You close the curtain, no one is inside. Let's say there's no living being we've ever seen. I mean, there's no other living being, even living beings we can't perceive. So there's no there are no subtle insects or, no beings of other realms. So hypothetically, let's say there's no one in here. Does this cease to be a room?
No, because if someone would come, they would be able to perceive it again.
They would be able to perceive it. It's similar in the text. They talk about, like, if something is a kilo, you don't have to weigh it every time for it to be a kilo, right? If you've weighed a certain amount of apples or oranges, if they are 1 kilo, it's not necessary every moment to weigh this again and again to have, yes, because the moment you weigh it, it's again 1 kilo. So yes, absolutely, that's not necessary. But going back to her point with the 22 degrees, do they exist therefore objectively, or are they totally subjectively with the 22 and the mercury and everything?
I just think this is a point where it's easy to get tricked into believing there is something. She's right.
This is a tricky point. Like time, for instance. Like we watch time pass and, it goes from 1 second to the next and so forth. So it seems there's something objectively. But then we know time is relative. Take Einstein's theory of the relativity of times. If you move very quickly, actually time slows down. And even without that, I mean, who moves that quickly? But even then, it's totally subjective, right? An hour can last forever. It can seem like a whole day, and a whole day can seem like an hour, right? So it's totally subjective, isn't it? Just because the clock tells me one thing or another, but we're talking about our experiences. It feels like the clock is wrong, although we wouldn't say it is, no, because it's in dependence on other factors around us. And again, this is the fine distinction between here saying, well, the elements around us don't exist, time, what is it labeled upon the changes around us, isn't it? And because they change with a certain speed, or no, I shouldn't put it that way. No, the speed is difficult to determine, but they do change in a certain, with a certain consistency, so that a day has 24 hours. kind of, but then again, it's a little difficult. Like the sun keeps, getting up a little earlier every day, and then it goes the other way around, because of the seasons. So basically, it's totally man-made, actually, because nature doesn't behave that way, right? 24 hours. It's not like the sun is up longer every day before the days become shorter again. So again, it's totally man-made. So how can time be objective? It's man-made.
There is still cause and effect. No?
Pardon?
There is still cause and effect going, impermanence and cause and effect going, even if there is no mind, no?
But does time still exist if there's no mind? That's not time. That is a symbolism that we read to mean time.
But it depends a bit on the measure we put on a simple
Yes.
quality.
Yes.
Time.
The measurement we have invented as humans, and so again, it's subjective, right?
But then still that the sun goes up and down every day, no matter at which time, this will also exist when humans are not here, no? It's not made up by humans.
Well, is there a sun if there's no humans? What is the sun?
But there's
But the
something
time
which
is
is
based on-
There's
not labeled-
something.
which is not labeled sun.
Okay, so the sun is labeled. The sun is labeled, right? Where does it start? Where does it end? It's not as concrete, right? We call it everyday sun, but the object is every day slightly different. But there's something there. Yes, please, show me that something there.
But is that the fact that we cannot find it? Does it mean that it's proof that there is nothing? I remember I think one of the saying that the fact that we cannot find something, does that mean that there is nothing?
Well, it depends on how you search. You cannot find anything that exists independent of labeling. Yes, yeah, that's what it means. Not find anything. There's different ways of searching. If I search for my iPhone on this table and saying I won't find it, that would be ridiculous. I'm searching for something without analyzing what makes this a phone. I'm just accepting the convention of phone, and then I search for it. Of course I find it. But why is this a phone? If I go deeper, if I engage in what's called ultimate analysis, then I can't find that phone. But this whole discussion we have, it's so difficult for one simple reason. Well, not that simple, but for one reason, that things, when we analyze the way we do, and we do understand it to some degree, when we go in that direction, but then everything appears to us in the opposite way. All our experiences are based on the opposite. There's nothing supporting that. So you have two minds here. The mind that does the analysis and comes to some kind of agreement. Okay, I cannot find the knee. I cannot find the kneecap. I cannot find the blood vessel. Okay. But then you look at it with your normal mind, the ordinary mind, and go, but wait a minute. A whole real reality, there's this world out there that we discover. So the moment that mind arises, it crashes the other way. And it crashes it because the first mind it's very weak. We haven't developed it. In fact, we always reinforce the second mind. We reinforce our misconception. If we thought about emptiness constantly, so there's some practitioners, I sometimes listen to teachings from my teachers. So I remember one of my teachers just spoke about this incredible monk from Drepung Losang Ling, who's passed away since then, who would always talk about emptiness. He would always find a way during a puja, they're chatting, and he always talked about emptiness. Sooner or later, so that showed his mind was just constantly thinking about it. So in that way, you can slowly reduce the other mind, right? That misconception that we ordinarily keep reinforcing. Every time we get angry, every time there's an affliction, we reinforce that misconception because it has to arise for that misconception to be there. So we reinforce it. That's why it's so hard. The only way to counteract our misconception, to weaken it, is to constantly think about it, constantly meditate about it. But who wants to do that? Right? First of all, there's so much other stuff to meditate on. And love, compassion makes us feel good. So we want to feel good. We live in this entertainment, this age of entertainment.
But when you realize emptiness, you also feel good because it's an antidote to everything.
I know. When you exercise, you also feel good. But then people don't exercise, even though they feel good afterwards. So we know that. She's totally right. But we don't know right now how good it feels. Someone tells us it feels good, but we have no experience of it. Yeah. Oh, but so even if now we think about it, we feel good. If you mean that, but then how long can we think about it before we're distracted, right? So all I'm trying to say is we have to think about it more. And that's why yes.
Also this idea about what emptiness can be
Yes.
makes happy.
Just thinking about what emptiness can be.
If you haven't realized it completely or something, you can have an image about what emptiness could be.
And that makes you happy?
This could make you happy, no?
Does it? You said no, which shows some doubt. You seem to have some doubt. I mean, you're not like, hey, it makes me.
But it's also scary.
It's also scary. They say if you really understand it for the first time, it's scary, especially when it comes to the I. Anyway, yeah, I thought it's good to bring this up again and again, because the thing is, when we study Uma, we have to study so much else. In preparation, it's not just enough to... If it was enough, you would never study this text. Lama Tsongkhapa wouldn't have taken all this time to explain every verse and explain on top of that, if that wasn't important in order to prepare our mind. So actually, this is all relating to emptiness. Is it really nice to study this all the time? I don't know.
There are also general descriptions of emptiness, no?
Are there general distinctions of emptiness? Are there different types of emptiness?
Text descriptions.
Pardon?
There are general descriptions of emptiness.
Yes.
Yes. So
Many different
you
descriptions.
can create an image in your mind, in everybody's mind. When you read this text and imagine this text.
Well, that's what I'm hoping to do here, to create an image in the mind. But every now and then going back to emptiness, the way I've learned about it. I mean, of course, it's just the intellectual kind of understanding that, has been passed on. No actual realization. But the point is, yes, so bring us back to that and make it more juicy that we have to study kind of a few other things, because we're going back to the other tenet schools today.
Is it okay to ask a question about what you said now?
Pardon?
Is it okay to ask a question about what you said now?
Yes, sure, of course. Please.
So you talked about looking for your phone.
Looking for my phone, yes.
So can you what exactly is the line between ultimate analysis and conventional analysis?
What is the line between conventional analysis and ultimate analysis?
I've heard some say that any analysis is ultimate analysis, but Lama Tsongkhapa does not hold this view.
Yes, not every analysis is ultimate
Or any
analysis.
conceptual mind is not necessarily ultimate analysis.
Not every conceptual mind is an ultimate analysis. No, let's stick with an analysis, right? No, not every analysis is an ultimate analysis. What's the difference between conventional analysis and ultimate analysis?
Ultimate analysis is basically what's it called? Negation.
A negation?
Non-affirming negation.
What?
It's a non-affirming.
Oh.
negation.
No. The analysis is not a non-affirming negation. It's an analysis.
Yeah, but you're doing it with non-affirming.
No, you're not. You're not doing it with non-affirming.
Well, you're not doing it with this is not this, this is not this, this is not this.
No.
As soon as you
But
say-
that is the conclusion. What is the analysis? The conclusion is that it's not this, is not that, and so forth. You're absolutely right. That's the result. That's the result. What is the analysis? The analysis is the cause of coming to the conclusion it's not this, that, and the other. So Alan, you're totally right. It is that's the conclusion. But the analysis is the cause that leads to that conclusion, isn't that? It's that mental process. So what makes an analysis an ultimate analysis in such a way that it leads to the resultant conclusion cannot be found. So can you
The
define
way that an object exists.
analyzing the way in which an object, so if I analyze this, whether it exists as a Samsung phone or an iPhone,
Compared to your conventional understanding
okay. So actually,
or experience.
okay, did you want to say something?
Going closer to the object.
Going closer to the object. Mentally, okay. I would argue, and I don't know, I could be wrong. I mean, this is how I look at it. I can analyze whether this phone is something other than, right? I mean, like, I'm not using the word phone. I'm not saying what makes this phone a phone. So without analyzing what makes the phone a phone, I can analyze, is this phone an iPhone or I don't know, a Samsung phone? Is it a phone altogether, as in like the conventional sense? Does it function as a phone? But the moment I ask, what makes this a phone? Where's the phone within? What is exactly the phone? So how does it exist? In other words, how does it exist as a phone? That's when I start ultimate analysis.
Compared to how you experience it as a phone.
I mean, you can compare it how I experience it. You can compare it how it is understood in the world. I mean, you can take any approach.
For you specifically.
No, but what other people, I can also analyze how other people look at it. Not just me personally. It makes more sense.
But you can never know.
No, but they can tell me about it, even though I don't know 100%. I'm just analyzing, right? I'm just analyzing. I could take any kind of perspective. I could take my own perspective. I could take another person's perspective, though I never know 100%, but I can still rightly assume what their perspective may be. But then I analyze where's the phone within the phone, basically? Or what makes this a phone? How does it exist?
There's always a question. Like if I ask what makes it a phone, because I can make calls. Then it's, I think.
What makes it a phone? Because
I just ask, what makes it a phone? Oh, because I can make calls with it.
yeah, but okay, but this is again, this is just talking about a conventional aspect of it, right? Making a phone call.
Question, what makes it a phone? Because it merely appears as a phone.
Let me rephrase that. Search for the phone among its parts. Search for the phone among its parts. So the parts, the way I experience it, or the way. So search for it. So I'm not searching for, I mean, being able to make a phone call. Where's the phone within that? Right?
You're not able to.
Pardon?
You are not able.
I am able to make a phone call. So that's one of its aspects, one of its parts, one of its functions. So a function is described as a part. Ordinarily, we think of parts. It's in Buddhist language, a function or an aspect or a characteristic is all a part of something.
Because it's one entity.
Pardon?
Because it's one entity with it. That's why.
Because it couldn't exist without that, right? Because it couldn't. So whatever makes a phone conventionally, it's not just its physical parts. It's not just its temporal parts, because it exists for some time. It's also its function. It's its other characteristics. So if these characteristics were not there, it wouldn't be a phone. But now I search for that phone within those parts, within those aspects, and I'm searching what makes it a phone. Does that make sense? All right. I hope that kind of, and again, this is just how I look at it, and that you need to analyze further. But when we talk about ultimate analysis, that's how I look at it. That's how I understand it. Look for the object within its parts and try to find it. Try to find something, but what are we trying to find? We're trying to find its existence the way it appears to us. The way it appears to our mind. So we're not looking, well, actually in the text it's quite clear that even if you look for the conventional I, with this analysis you won't find it. Even if you look for the merely labeled I on the basis of its parts, you can't find it because then it would exist intrinsically. If you would find it, it would, so mostly when we ask, when you search something among its basis of labeling, that's how it's usually expressed. But the basis of labeling is another way of saying its parts. So searching for something among its parts, or its basis of labeling. So what is that something? Usually in the text they say an inherently existing object. And the debate that arises in that context is, well, if you didn't search for an inherently existent object, but just a conventionally existing phone, would you find that? And the answer is no, because ultimate analysis means you automatically search for something existing ultimately. The analysis is of such a nature that even if you take a basis, or you take an object that is conventionally existent, the way you search for it, if you were to find it, you would find something ultimately that is intrinsically existent. Does that make sense? That is a really important distinction. So the moment you start to search for this object among its parts, you're engaging in ultimate analysis. And if you find something, you found inherent existence, which means you have a wrong consciousness, because inherent existence doesn't exist. Right? I mean, if you believe you found something, you're actually mistaken. Okay.
Keshima, just
Yes.
one thing is that when I'm searching for the phone, and I'm looking for it in its parts.
Say that again, sorry.
I said when I'm looking at it in terms of an ultimate analysis.
Right, ultimate.
The phone. Why am I at all thinking it's a phone? Why can't I just go deeper and see that it's just molecules, subatomic particles, and the minute here I'm assuming that, I mean, I'm looking for the phone, but won't ultimate analysis be that what am I actually looking at?
So you're saying you shouldn't be looking for, it's not necessary to look for a phone.
Yeah,
You
I'm
could just
trying to see what it is, you know, what is, because
Okay.
in the ultimate analysis, it should be what it is. So here I'm just negating that it's not a phone.
Okay.
Or it's not.
Oh, I understand. So you don't want to just negate, you want something affirmative.
Yeah, I'm just searching. So that also I won't find.
So you're just searching. I'm not sure I understand correctly. Why do we do this? Because we're attached to a phone. So why would you be searching for the atoms? You're not attached to them. We're trying to find out. You see, the whole reason we're doing this is because we have afflictions. We suffer. We have problems. Why do we have problems? Because we have afflictions such as attachment, anger, envy, and so forth. So those minds, they can only operate, they're only able to function because we perceive whatever we are angry with to exist inherently, whatever we attach to exist inherently, whatever we feel arrogant about to exist inherently. Now let's take the most important thing we're attached to, which is I. Wouldn't it make sense to take that object we're so attached to, the I, we're attached to its happiness. My happiness is just another way of saying I'm attached to the happiness of this I. So there's an I to which this happiness belongs. Therefore, it all comes down to misperceiving the I. If I were to search for the I, why would I search for its subtle atoms? I'm not attached to the subtle atoms. I'm not running around all day long, oh, my subtle atoms, don't look at my subtle atoms, don't push me, you're pushing my subtle atoms. I'm not making fun of you, please don't get me wrong. I'm just, like putting it in an exaggerated way for the sake of clarity. So what am I attached to? That's what, like, they do say, like, analyze tables and stuff and so forth. I mean, just for the point of the exercise, but really, the instruction should really be what we're mainly attached to, what we're angry with. If we hate someone strongly, maybe in the beginning we should stop it, because every time we think about them, we just keep hating them and we're too busy analyzing. But if at some point we get some distance to an object we have a very strong afflicted emotional response to, well, then we should analyze that. Where is the enemy within my enemy? Where is the jerk within the jerk? Where's the I within the I? Where's the most wonderful person in the world without whom I couldn't live within that person? Does that make sense? So why should I be looking for the atoms? Because the atoms are not causing me trouble. They don't cause me, there's no fear that I may lose them.
No, I'm not saying that you're looking for the atoms. I'm looking at the object very closely. And I find atoms.
You find that object?
No, I said if I'm looking at the object and I break it down and I only see it as molecules or atoms or.
So then you break down the molecules and atoms. You never find anything.
Keep going on and actually saying that it's not even just that the table doesn't exist, but it doesn't exist in any kind of way that I could have thought of it.
With this analysis, you never find anything.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you said you wanted to search for something else. So with this analysis, because ultimate analysis is, by definition, searching for something inherent. Searching something that is intrinsic, something that exists from the side of the object. That's why we use this weird term, that exists from the side. That word side is weird. That exists in and of itself. Like that somehow you find something essential that makes this a phone, in other words. Right? Either it is merely labeled, it is a phone only because we label it, or it is already a phone and that's why we call it that. There's only two options. If it is already a phone, where am I looking for that phone? Here or here? Not there, not there, not over there, not here, exactly here. So here among its parts. And if I were to find that which makes this a phone, okay, then it's not merely labeled. It is labeled because it is already a phone. Does that make sense? So we search for exactly, it appears to me as if it were a phone able to define itself. As if it were telling me, I'm a phone, look at me. Doesn't that appear to your mind like that? Yes. So that is inherent, that's the appearance of inherent existence. But when we search it, we cannot find it.
But this is not Prasangika.
That is Prasangika. That is only Prasangika. Because they're the only ones who say you cannot find it.
You cannot find it.
Yes, you cannot find it.
Okay.
Yes, you cannot find it.
There's something
Yes.
labeled what is to find.
No. Ooh, so sorry. I went for an hour. Talk about the relativity of time. I thought it was at the most half an hour, but it was a whole hour. Well, anyway. I hope it was not too unhelpful. But I thought his whole question, it was really good. He asked this question. So dependent on the mind, what does that even mean? All right, let's go back to the text. Little time we have left. Well, still some time left. Sorry, just a sec. Is it just me or is it really hot now? Oh, it's hot, okay. I thought empty was really... Okay. Now we have the difficult task now. We're now learning about the other schools as well. Which, I don't know, I mean, I personally love doing this, but I'm not sure everyone does. And I certainly remember in the beginning I didn't. That level of confusion was just too much. But what we did last time, in this context, because we tried to understand the three types of reasoning. We're on page 140, well, actually 149, but I briefly want to summarize 148 again. We're here now, and the chart may also help you to understand this better. I mean, just have it all in one chart. Here, we're talking about Vaibhashika and Sautrantika, Chittamatra, Svatrantika, and Prasangika, going through them. And you can kind of see that progression. On page 148, the last passage tells us the Vaibhashika and Sautrantika schools do not accept emptiness. Okay, all right, so pretty straightforward. only selflessness. They only talk about a particular type of self or absence of a particular type of self, which is not talking about anything but the absence of a self that exists different from mind and body and controls mind and body, utilizes mind and body. Okay, so we have moments when the self appears in that way. And that is reflected in that school, in that they say, okay, that doesn't exist. That's a very coarse. Let's be aware of the following fact. We perceive of the self sometimes the way the Vaibhashika negates it, the Sautrantika negates it. That's a very coarse negation. Sometimes we perceive of a self that's slightly subtler, a self that doesn't have to appear to our mind, like the Svatantrika. Sometimes we perceive of a self that can actually be found if we just search long enough, that is not merely labeled. That would be the deepest. So it just depends on the situation. Okay. Now, the Vaibhashika and Sautrantika, they help us to understand that coarsest level of no self. No such owner, separate self that owns mind and body. Okay. But they don't talk about anything else. So when it comes to objective existence, everything out there, does it depend on our mind? No. They're actually also in contradiction to science. They would not agree with the scientific understanding that colors don't exist out there. Remember, we had these discussions with Aidan and other people in the past when we talk about Dutta, like the collected topics. And I remember it coming up and I was very confused. I thought, yeah, how does the Sautrantika and the scientific view fit? And then at the end I came to the conclusion, no, it doesn't fit. Because the scientific view does not reflect Vaibhashika or Sautrantika. The view that colors are just light waves. That's not in accordance with Vaibhashika and Sautrantika, excuse me. They wouldn't say that, that colors don't exist out there. Okay, so that's important. According to these two schools, only this form of selflessness, the lack of a self-sufficient, substantially existent I, that must be realized by those who want to be self-liberated and by those who want to become a Buddha. And there are only very few who become Buddhas. So not to worry, most will become self-liberated. Okay, so that's the first step. That's pretty straightforward. And then you have the other schools. By contrast, the Chittamatra and Madhyamika schools. I changed that. The first line of page 149, it now says, and the next time I give you the new material, that'll be soon, it will say, by contrast, the Chittamatra and Madhyamika schools do accept an ultimate mode of existence that applies to all phenomena. So they talk about a mode of existence, not just selflessness, but a mode of existence that applies to all phenomena. And they say that although some beings may initially attain self-liberation, all sentient beings will eventually become awakened. Yeah. According to the Chittamatra school, emptiness refers to the absence of external objects. So last time I spoke about this. Vaibhashika and Sautrantika, everything exists out there. The mind is kind of important, but you know, it really accords with the way we look at the world. Then you have this Chittamatra school going into an extreme and another extreme, saying there's only mind. First, the mind is not very important. Now there's only mind. And this is very effective. I mean, even if you're on a balancing beam, one extreme, another extreme, right? If we lean too much towards the left, we need to lean more strongly to the right to find the middle. That is also true intellectually. Intellectually, I give you another example in Buddhism, where you very strongly lean in one direction and the text tell you to lean in another direction, but it's a little extreme and still it's effective. And that is from the method point of view. When initially we think, do you know what it is?
The Shabbat light and the three kinds of bodhicitta.
Yeah, for instance, when we talk about the different forms of bodhicitta, there's one form of bodhicitta where you visualize, I will take everyone to enlightenment first and I will go last. I will take personally everyone to enlightenment and I will go past. That's impossible. First, you become enlightened, you know what to do, and then you teach others. Plus, you're omniscient and you can teach others effectively. But because we have this self-centered mind that is so powerful, we may even catch ourselves thinking, oh, I wish I was enlightened. I'd be so special. Oh, if I were special. You know, like we want to become enlightened, but we don't do it for the benefit of all sentient beings. It's kind of for our own benefit. And then it's beneficial to think, oh no, I want to take everyone to enlightenment. I'd be the last one. Although that's impossible. Or another simpler example maybe is, right now we think I'm most important. I am most important. And then switching that through familiarity is only because we're most familiar with that. We're familiar with our misconception of the I. That leads to a view I'm more important than others, naturally. So now we try to undo at least our familiarization with the self-centered mind. Through certain reasonings that actually make sense, I now think everyone else is most important, not including myself. But that's actually wrong. We're all equally important. So to think others are more important than myself is not realistic. That wouldn't make sense. We're all equally important. But it still helps our mind. We're encouraged to think in that way because, like on the balancing beam, we've fallen into one extreme. Now we try to balance that out a little bit. So there are many examples like that, which the Chitta Matra is also here from the point of view of wisdom. The Chitta Matra helps us to balance that out. So if you start suddenly thinking, imagine like you now study Chitta Matra. The way we were trained in philosophy was done in a very clever way that didn't feel that clever at the time. Or no, it felt clever, but very exhausting. Our study was organized in such a way you have no time for anything but the study. Nothing, no time. I mean, unless if you just take your time and you don't go to the debate or you don't prepare, okay, that's different. But if you want to keep up, there's no time. Every single minute is about the Dharma. Okay, there are pujas in between, there's certain, yes, that was also part of it, but that is to accumulate merit. And some would just sit there and maybe reflect on what they had studied. The point is that it was done in such a way that you have, if you want to keep up, there's very little time to socialize and do anything else. Think of anything other than the Dharma. Now, during these times, when you think Chitta Matra, you start thinking like a Chitta Matra person. There's only the mind. You try to understand them. Put yourself into their shoes. So there's only my mind, right? I'm looking around. All these people, they're just appearances to my mind in the sense they're not out there. When we say mere appearances in the Chitta Matra school, that means something very different to the Prasangika school. In the Prasangika school, it means it's still out there. There's something out there. We do conventionally talk about external versus internal. In the Chitta Matra school, it literally means there's nothing out there. There's only mind. And then you realize that can actually be quite effective. Because if I'm angry with someone called Bob, right, and by just merely their sight, it makes me angry, and I realize, but Bob doesn't exist out there. Bob is just an appearance to my mind. How angry can I be with Bob? Or if I'm attached to another person, right? I want to see them, I want to see their kind face. But then, when I realize that kind face is just like, I'm just dreaming of them. How about it? And this reminds me of these examples when people chat to someone online and they fall in love with this wonderful person and they actually don't exist. It was just an AI, right? So just take that analogy. We're not saying it's the same, but the Chitta Matra school says, there's nothing out there. It's kind of like you've been chatting to an AI. You made up that whole story. You want to get married with them and live together until the day you die. And then you realize there was never anyone. It was just a projection of your own mind. What happens with your attachment? Maybe it lingers a little bit. You've been doing this for a month on end, so it lingers a little bit. But before long, it'll go away on its own. It's nothing to feed it. What feeds it? The sense there's this real person out there. It feeds that attachment. You take away the food, right? So that's kind of Chitta Matra. And then comes the next level, Svatantrika. And there are two, and that's a little tricky. There is the ones that follow the Chitta Matra school. They still say nothing exists out there. But they say that is not the ultimate nature of phenomena. There's something deeper than that, right? It's not just that phenomena don't exist out there, but also that they couldn't exist without appearing to the mind. That's a deeper level. It's a slightly deeper level. And then you have the Svatantrika that say there are external phenomena, but just as before, they don't exist without appearing to the mind. So this is what both Svatantrika school believe in. Those that believe in the non-existence of external phenomena and those that believe in the existence of external phenomena. But they both agree that emptiness refers to the fact that nothing can exist without appearing to a mind. And then the Prasangika school says, that's ridiculous. That's not emptiness. That's not deep enough. Yes, we accept nothing can exist without appearing to a correct mind. Okay, we accept that. But there's an even deeper level. So you see this progression? Can you see this progression? Isn't it genius the way it's kind of like, right? Taking us from one to the next. But the thing is, you have to spend some time with it. And that's what we did. We spent some time with Chitta Matra. We spent some time with Svatantrika. We spent some time with both Svatantrika schools, but mainly the one following Chitta Matra. And after all this, our mind was already made more flexible to think that way, to kind of let go of our sense, taking that, the way we perceive things for granted. You learn to doubt, at least, at the very least. And then, of course, you continue with the Prasangika school. Okay, that's why we do all these different schools. Okay, anyway. So Chitta Matra school refers to emptiness of external objects, and then you have the two subdivisions. That's where we got to last time. So the two subdivisions, Svatantrika, which refers to Sautantrika, Svatantrika. Oh, I forgot to mention one thing, sorry. The Chitta Matra school, they say that emptiness is the absence of external objects. That's emptiness, okay? Right? Emptiness just means absence of external phenomena, all right. Then when you take the Svatantrika Madhyamika school, the next school, they say emptiness refers to the absence of true existence. In other words, phenomena do not exist without appearing to the mind. Okay? Then you have the two subdivisions, Sautantrika Svatantrika that accepts external existence, and Yogacarya Svatantrika that doesn't. So here it becomes complicated. Now the question is, okay, if they accept emptiness, what do you have to realize in order to become self-liberated? To become a Buddha, you have to realize emptiness. They all agree. All the Chitta Matra school, the Madhyamika school, they all say to become a Buddha, you have to realize emptiness. But only the Prasangika school says to become self-liberated, you also have to realize emptiness. They're the only school that say, no matter who you are, you have to realize emptiness. All the other schools, they don't go all that way. Why? Because when the Buddha, why did the Buddha mislead us? Right? Why did the Buddha teach us 3 schools that in the end are not the final schools? Well, because it was too difficult to take for a lot of the disciples of the Buddha. For the time being, it wasn't like the Buddha was deceiving them until the end of time. No, for the time being, it was easier to tell them, okay, self-liberation, you don't have to realize emptiness. Only if you want to become a Buddha. And many of them, I mean, look at the stories of the Buddha. There are so many arhats. The numbers of arhats were much greater than the numbers of bodhisattvas. So there was a lot more emphasis the Hinayana school, the foundational vehicle school, that became mainstream very quickly. What happened with the Universal Vehicle School? It was taught in secret in the beginning. It was too much. It was too much. So think, we existed at that time. We were around at the time of the Buddha, whether we were little worms in the ground or we were the shopkeepers that were, I don't know, sitting there as the Buddha walked past. We don't know. 2,600 years ago, we have no idea. We could be in any realm. We could have been in the human realm. We could have been in this world. So if we were in this world, maybe we were disciples of the Buddha at the time. And we received these basic teachings, right? Then when we messed it up in the meantime, well, we were disciples and then we did something else for the next 2,000 whatever years, or we did something, we don't know. But the point is, let's not forget that there's this progression. The teachings of the Universal Vehicle, they became mainstream teachings much later. And I believe it's because people's mind were ready now to receive them in public. It wasn't putting people off. Think historically. I think it's important to think of Buddhism also from the point of view of its development in time. Doesn't that make sense? And nowadays, so the Buddha taught all these schools. For some, they could be taught the highest view, of course, and they could deal with it, and some couldn't. And nowadays, even if we are ready to receive the Prasangika school, it's still helpful for our mind to go through the other schools as well. Just as we all have the potential possibly to go to university, but we still go through elementary school and high school. Does that make sense? So that kind of progression. Now, the Sautrantika Svatantrika, together with the Chittamatrans, agree with the Vaibhashika and Sautantrikas that hearers and solitary realizers need only generate the wisdom directly realizing the absence of a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. So, you have now how many schools? If you subdivide them, Vaibhashika, Sautantrika, Chittamatra, Sautantrika Svatantrika, and Yogacara Svatantrika. You have 5 schools that say to become self-liberated, you don't have to realize emptiness. You only have to realize the absence of a self that operates as a controller of mind and body, which is impossible, of course. So you have to just realize that the self doesn't exist that way. Then you'll be liberated. They all say the same thing. So you see that gap between the Prasangika school and the other schools. Does that make sense? Okay, so there's a huge gap. Explaining why Lama Tsongkhapa spent so much time on explaining why hearers in solitary realizers, that is, those who want to become self-liberated, also need to realize emptiness. Okay. The Yogacara Svatantrika, okay, so the Chittamatrans agree with the Vaibhashikas and Sautantrikas. Oh, actually, there's one slight difference. The Yogacara Svatantrika, they draw a distinction between and this makes it a little bit more complicated. In this school, we studied in great detail. We studied this for 6 years. We studied we didn't study so much their views as instead we studied a text that was based on that particular view. So for 6 years, 7 years actually, no, 6 years. For 6 years, we studied the hidden meaning of the Perfectional Wisdom Sutras. So the different grounds and path, the different meditational states, how you progress basically when you meditate. We didn't study the object you have to meditate on, emptiness, yet. We just studied about the different minds. Okay? So it's kind of like an extensive study of Lorik, a study of Lorik, but the advanced stages of the mind. We studied that in a lot of detail. And emptiness came up, but not to that degree. And we studied it from the point of view of the Yogacara Svatantrika school, which is slightly complicated. Because in that school, they actually draw a slight distinction. They distinguish between hearers and solitary realizers. They actually don't say, previously I said the Yogacara Svatantrika school said, you only have to realize the absence of a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. But I forgot, there's a slight difference, and there's one complication here. What they say is, they present a different explanation of the principal objects of realization of the 3 types of practitioners. So the other schools, except the Prasangika, say, what are the three types of practitioners, first of all? Hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas. Those are the three types of practitioners. In Tibetan, they're called that. The three types of persons, or the three types of practitioners here. Again, let me repeat what I said before. So the Vaibhashika, the Sautantrika, the Chittamatra, and the Sautantrika Svatantrika, they say you only have to realize whether a hearer or solitary realizer, in order to become self-liberated, you only have to realize this, the absence of a self-sufficient, substantially existent I. The Yogacara Svatantrika, they present a different explanation for the different practitioners. They assert that hearers must realize the absence of a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. Solitary realizers must realize the absence of external objects, which is not emptiness in this school. And bodhisattvas must realize the absence of true existence. Okay? Now again, if you just memorize the chart, what I just say is easy. It's just a matter of remembering. It's a little complicated, but please don't think it's not important. It really is. The Tibetans have shown us for more than 1,000 years that the study of this really is important, because it really affects the mind in a profound way. Okay, so therefore, according to the Chittamatra school and both subdivisions of Svatantrika and Madhyamika, the realization of emptiness is required only for bodhisattvas who aspire to Buddhahood, not for hearers or solitary realizers seeking personal liberation, in short. The Madhyamika Prasangika school, in contrast, rejects the view that grasping at a self-sufficient, substantially existent self is the root or principal cause of samsara. No way. If you just remove that self-grasping mind, grasping at a self-sufficient, substantially existent self, that's not enough. You will not be able to eliminate anger and so forth. Unfortunately. I wished it was, because it's so much easier to understand that that kind of self doesn't exist than understanding that it doesn't exist inherently. Although, like the Chittamatra and Svatantrika Madhyamika schools, the Prasangika school accepts an ultimate mode of existence that applies to all phenomena and maintains that all sentient beings will eventually attain full awakening. It holds that the fundamental cause of cyclic existence is the misconception that grasps at intrinsic existence, that phenomena are intrinsically a table, a phone, and so forth, and are not merely labeled. Consequently, the absence of intrinsic existence must be directly realized in order to attain both liberation and full awakening. Therefore, like the followers of the Vaibhashika and Sautantrika, actually in this way they're similar to the Vaibhashika and Sautantrika, the Prasangika hold that the three types of practitioners, hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas, have the same principal object of realization. Right? Vaibhashika and Sautantrika says it's the absence of a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. Prasangika says it's the absence of intrinsic existence. But in that way, they're similar. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. All right. Now we start with the main topic. Oh, there's C chart 2. C chart 2. Now you have chart 2. And it didn't fit on the second page, which is why I added another page, just in case you were wondering why it's got something else also on the third page. Yeah, so it starts on page 2. The problem was if I added page numbers, it messed up the chart, which is why I didn't put. And I thought it maybe, I don't know how the next chart is going to look like, because I'm just working on the material at this point. So I don't know whether I'll use, I thought it makes more sense to have all the charts and diagrams in one folder, but I don't know whether I can continue with that. So you have now 2 charts in there. And what we discussed recently, the most complicated issues, are hopefully a little bit easier with the chart. So I don't know, but yeah. And again, the simplest way to understand this is to memorize it. Seriously, if you struggle with this and you want to understand it, just sit down and memorize it. That's the best way to understand it. Because then it's clear in your mind. Once you memorize it, there's this. And we all memorize this, but not in a formal way. You learn, some of us memorized it in a formal way. It just depends. But at some point you won't forget. And when you don't forget, you have an internal chart. And the moment a school comes up, you have this, cell, present. And it's never confusing. This is how you learn it. After a while, it's not like you learn endless information about the Vaibhashika. There's always something new to, no, there's a limit to it. And so you know in your mind, and suddenly things become very clear. It really opens your mind to so many different aspects. So much makes sense when you know them and when you've memorized that. So I promise you, memorizing this will take an hour, maybe 2 at the most. The first chart. You don't think so? Sitting down and memorizing these cells? No. Sitting down. Pardon?
A week.
Okay, a week is fine. A week is nothing in your life. What is a week? A week.
20 years ago, maybe.
No way. No. I always tell this. I used to tell people in the class. I haven't told this story for a long time now. But there's something I read in Newsweek. This was before your time. When I first came here to India, before internet and so forth, there was the only information you could get about the outside world, like international news. They had Indian Times, the Tribute, and so forth. So there was 1-page international news. So it told you exactly who Nicole Kidman got married to, or, a little bit of international, but it wasn't it was mainly about India. But you could buy 2 magazines. One was called Newsweek and one was called Time magazine. I'm sure some of you remember that, right? I mean, that was the international news, at least here in Dharamsala. I mean, in other cities it was different. But this was McLeod. So, it was the bookworm. It carried this particular, and there was no, people weren't interested. So you had certain Indian newspapers, and there was this international section, but it was mainly about India. So, and I remember reading about Newsweek and Time magazine. So they had really good articles about great things. Very expensive. They were 50 rupees. That was so much money. So I never bought both. I bought one of the 2. And I remember, sorry, this is silly of me telling you about all these details, but the point is that at that time, I read an article about this person, an American, who was 75 years old, and he memorized a Greek myth, some kind of mystical story with 25,000 verses. And he memorized the whole thing. And he was able to cite randomly from this particular text. And then when he was asked, how was he able to memorize this? I mean, over so many years, and he was like, don't talk about 20 years ago, he was 75 and did this at the age of 75, right? So he said, you need discipline and joy. And I thought, wow, for everyone who thinks they can't memorize, I mean, this guy, he was 75 when he did it for the first time and he could do it. So I keep telling people, don't think you can't memorize. The main obstacle to us memorizing is thinking we cannot memorize. You see, like I live next to Kirti Monastery. These monks get up early in the morning, they memorize for an hour. They stay up late, they memorize for an hour. Who does that? Right? You're really tired in the evening, you're tired in the morning. Who sits down to memorize for an hour? I promise you, if you do an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening with discipline and joy, you learn this, I don't know, within a week, maybe faster, maybe it takes you a week. But then you know it. Really, you know it. And honestly, who doesn't want to, I mean, does any of you have brain games on your phone? Have you ever played them? Some do, right? Yeah, like all these apps to keep your brain young so that you don't get dementia and all that stuff, right? I mean, yeah, my mom does them and my stepmom does too. And yeah, they all do. And what is part of that? Memorizing. There's a lot of, my stepmom has this one thing about something fit mind or something. And they give you a phone number with 8 digits and you have to memorize them in 5 seconds. She's very good at it. I was like, well, how did you do that? Right? She's very good. She does it all the time. So memorization is good for you. That's what these apps tell us. So to convince you further, to try to convince you, start memorizing. It's worth it. I'm not saying poems and, other stuff, but seriously, memorize. It's really good for you. Okay, anyway. In the following 3 passages now, and this is one of the major subjects, the 3 reasonings. It's one of if you talk about what are you studying right now, and you say the 3 reasonings, everyone knows where you got to in the text. So it's one of the major subjects. In the following 3 passages, but it's more about debate here. This is more about the practice of debate. In the following 3 passages, Lama Tsongkhapa sets forth what are commonly known as the 3 reasonings, Riksum, Rikpasum, Riksum, Riksum, which logically establish that hearers and solitary realizers cognize emptiness and constitute a central topic in the study of Madhyamika. Based on the explanations given in this context in Acharya Chandrakirti's auto-commentary, so here it's less Acharya Chandrakirti's entering the middle way, but the auto-commentary. The 3 reasonings are presented in the form of logical consequences, drawing out the absurdities that would follow if hearer and solitary realizer arhats did not realize emptiness. Okay. So then it says, without such wisdom then, Lama Tsongkhapa says, without such a wisdom, the wisdom realizing emptiness, like the seers, who become free of attachment toward all levels cyclic existence, all levels of cyclic existence. Is this, what is this? Off would be off cyclic existence. I don't know whether it's a typo from my side or it's a typo actually in the root text. Accept the peak of existence through the mundane path, viewing the realms of existence in terms of gradations and refinement, Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha Arhats too would be outshone through this realization even by the Bodhisattva who has generated the first ground of the ultimate awakening mind. This would be so because Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas will lack the knowledge that things lack intrinsic existence. Trust me, this is just as difficult in Tibetan, that sentence. It's just one sentence, incredible. Tibetan sentences can be so long, which makes it really difficult to read them. I mean, in English now, shorter and shorter sentences because we don't have the attention span any longer. Interesting, right? It's the modern way of writing in English is considered to be better to write short sentences, not that long ones. Well, I guess because we lack the attention span to follow a long sentence. I don't know why, but Tibetan sentences can cover a whole page. You would naturally... Pardon?
Sometimes a verb at the end of this page.
Pardon?
A verb at the end.
The what? The verb comes at the end. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but you usually have a few verbs. If it's really like a page-long sentences, you have verbs in between because that would become really difficult. Yeah, but then in English you would automatically separate the sentences. But the fact, I mean, that is so difficult to follow. It's so difficult. It requires so much attention, and it shows. Just reading Tibetan really trains your brain. Yeah. Okay, but anyway, so what does this passage mean here? This passage draws an analogy with non-Buddhist Indian practitioners, also referred to as seers. Okay, so let's look at the quote at the footnote here, 38. Seer here, so we're on page 150. Sorry, I forget to say that. Seer here translates the Tibetan term Trangsong, which is the standard rendering of the Sanskrit rishi. So the spelling should be rishi bhavan. There's actually a place here called Rishi Bhavan. So seers, the term rishi, so I did some research on that, I hope I did it correctly, denotes an ascetic or sage endowed with spiritual insight, traditionally understood as one who directly perceives or sees reality through deep meditation and spiritual experience. That shows that actually Buddhist practitioners and non-Buddhist practitioners, definitely at the time of the Buddha, I don't know much about non-Buddhist schools. I've learned only what I've learned in the Buddhist texts. At the time of the Buddha, they were very similar, which is why the Buddha came in the first place. There were so many similarities in terms of, for instance, analyzing what is the I. I mean, where do you find a spiritual system that analyzes what is the I? The 3 Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, do they analyze what the I is? No, they talk about a soul and that's the end of it, right? They do establish a kind of, but they don't explain that soul, do they? they keep mentioning it. I don't know, in Judaism, do they talk about the soul? You know, what is the soul? When does it come into existence? When does it get out of it? No, it's just mentioned.
They do.
Pardon?
I think they do.
They do?
I saw it, but I don't understand it now.
So the Orthodox Jews that study a lot of the
I think we're
Talmud.
talking Kabbalah about different types of eye and different levels, very high self.
So the kind of, the more advanced kind of parts of the studies, like the Kabbalah and stuff. The esoterical part of it. Okay, interesting. But in the non-Buddhist philosophical systems in India, it was very common. The Atman, I mean, I don't know whether any of you know about these non-Buddhist schools. I don't know. Just a little bit I read through Buddhist texts. But the point is they had, of course, karma, the explanation of karma, of rebirth, of all these different states of existence, I suppose. So great similarities. And we shouldn't misunderstand when the Buddhist texts refute these schools. This is not about criticizing anyone, and they're not going to read this anyway. They're not reading this. The non-Buddhist systems, it was not about giving a non-Buddhist follower a book by a Buddhist master and say, read this because you have a wrong view. It wasn't about that. Buddhism does not try to convert anyone. So those who are interested, okay, they can learn it. But we learn about these non-Buddhist views because we hold many of them as well. Subconsciously sometimes. We do believe in a self, for that matter, right? When in the non-Buddhist systems they explain the Atman very clearly, that's a beautiful way to bring to a conscious awareness our sense of a self, right? I mean, we do think I all the time, but even if you go to travel to find yourself, you're not looking for the I, right? I mean, we have this whole thing of like, I go to Asia to find myself, but it's not like you're sitting there, smoking whatever or doing whatever people do when they arrive in India. I mean, especially the hippies, they're not looking for the I, they're looking for a good time, feeling free, to do whatever they can. I mean, in the past, that's what it was, Indians were very tolerant of these hippies and stuff. They wouldn't feel that free anywhere else, so they came here and looking for the I. They weren't looking for the I, they were looking for a good time. So the thing is, therefore, when we hear about the non-Buddhist schools, they help us to understand some of the views we hold ourselves. Very beautifully, they talk about universals, for instance. The Buddhists always debate with the non-Buddhist schools on what are universals, right? It's like when we say table, we speak about table in general, which seems to suggest there are these tables we can see, and there is this universal table somewhere in space. How about numbers? Number 2, 3, and 4. What are these numbers? Is there a universal number 2 somewhere outside of time and space? Or what is 2? What is 3? We use it all the time. How do they exist, these numbers? Remember, I told you about this video, about this really good video, What Are Numbers? I think it's called. What Are Numbers? It's an English mathematician who offers 3 possibilities. One is the Platonian view on numbers, one is the nominal view on numbers, and one is the imaginative view on numbers. The first one is the Platonian view. Don't ask me why it's called Platonian. Maybe Plato said so. That says that numbers exist outside of time and space, and we can utilize them counting things. That is the Platonian view, right? That's like there's universal 2, universal 3, universal 4, and so forth. Then there's the view that numbers are just imagined. They don't exist. We just made them up. They don't actually exist. There are no numbers, but we made them up. That's the second view. And the third is they're merely nominal. So if you have like 2 pencils, the way children know how to count, you give them 2 pencils, you say, oh, there's 1 and there's another, making it 2. Which one is the Buddhist view of those 3? Which is the... Which Buddhism? Prasangika school. Which of those 3? You can. The second one is it's imaginative. It's just imagined. So the first one is Platonian, exists out there. The second is it's imaginative, and the third one is nominative. So on the basis of having 2 things, we say there's 2 pencils, we say 2. Okay, who thinks it's number 1? Raise your hand. Who thinks it's number 2? It's just imagined. No, Chitta, but Prasangika. Who thinks Prasangika? Okay, so Prasangika. Who thinks it's number 3? Very good. Yeah, so Chittamatra would say it's just comes from the mind, you're right. But in the Prasangika view, they would say it's nominative. And this has nothing to do with Buddhism. This view, and Rika, you have to watch this. Because of your argument, I'll send you the link. Why? Because they say, the reason they say nominative doesn't work, because pi has a certain value. How come that pi has a certain value? Like the circumference and the diameter of a circle always comes up with pi. It's always the same number. So that's the same thing with, that was Rika's point actually. I should have thought of it. So he made that point saying, he in the end, he only presents these 3 views and pros and cons for either view. So that numbers exist out of time and space doesn't make sense, of course. But his counter argument to the nominative that numbers exist nominatively was that pi is always the same. It's always the same value, right? It's always pi, like the circumference and the the diameter of a circle. If you kind of divide one through the other or one by the other, you get to pi. You always get to the same value. How is that possible if it's just nominative? Yeah.
It's also a debate of non-Prasangika schools in a way, right?
Yeah, same thing.
That's also, yeah.
A debate of non-Prasangika to Prasangika. Like if things are merely labeled,
Exactly.
and it could not function, it would be the same as just imaginative.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. That's a good point. That's also like, how would you distinguish between this table and another table? Right? It's kind of like, how can you, if they really in the end you can't find the plate and you can't find the phone, having gone down to a subatomic level and still you can't find it, how can there be a difference between the 2? Right? Yes, Rika, totally. Yeah. That's why the Svatantrika is so helpful, because they say you have to find something. You see, they think like us. Well, they think the way we feel. They think the way we feel, and we act out of our feelings. And that's why it's so helpful to learn the Svatantrika first, to become aware of the sense of there must be something there, to become aware of it. First, we're not even aware of it. We cannot even formulate it. We cannot even put it, but here it becomes part of our conscious part of the mind. Right. I know it's difficult. But you know what is more difficult? To stay in samsara. Right? This is really difficult. I know people say it's so hard. But more difficult is to stay in samsara until the end of time. So it's our choice. Work hard now or continue. Yeah. All right. Okay, let's explain this here. So these seers, these amazing practitioners who here an analogy is drawn with non-Buddhist Indian practitioners. They have to be explained here, who through mundane meditative absorptions, those were mundane from the point of view of they were not about emptiness, they were not about ultimate nature. These were mundane. It sounds a little bit like denigrating or deprecating these non-Buddhist schools, or they're just not mundane. But that's not the meaning here. Here it's in relation to the Buddhist super mundane view of emptiness, right? Or a direct realization of emptiness. So through mundane meditative absorptions, they were able to temporarily relinquish attachment to all levels of cyclic existence, except the highest, known as the peak of existence, in order to be reborn in those levels of the form or formless realms. Now, this is something really weird, but it's so fascinating. It's like when you learn about this first, you hear, I want to learn about Buddhism. What do I care about? I didn't come here to learn about other non-Buddhist systems. Definitely not from a Buddhist. That's how I felt. You know, if I want to learn about I want to learn about someone who really knows about them. But actually, I believe the Tibetans were quite good. I mean, Indian Buddhists, let's look at Nalanda. Again, history is quite important. What happened in Nalanda? Buddhists and non-Buddhists got together and debated with each other. And there was a great respect for each other's view. This was India in the past. Incredible. And I mean, even nowadays, it's reflected in the fact that so many people of different cultures, different religions can live together in relative peace. I mean, of course, there's sometimes tensions, but nothing of the tensions you would probably find in other countries. So in India, this is reflected in this view of respect for another tradition without having faith in it. His Holiness has talked about this a lot, but this is not just from His Holiness. I think history shows that for instance, in the Nalanda tradition, it was not only Buddhists, non-Buddhists came together to debate with Buddhists. And the Buddhists didn't try to convert one or the other. It wasn't in general tried. I mean, there was this kind of tradition if one teacher lost a debate against a group of another teacher, and they were of different philosophical views, then that teacher who lost and his disciples had to convert. That was kind of like a rule. But I don't know how much it was reinforced, how strongly it was reinforced, whether you were forced to do it or whether it was just just a tradition and people followed it. I can't tell. But what I'm trying to say is here that they learned from each other. They learned from each other, and they learned each other's view in order to understand your own view better. It's good to have also views that are different from that. Having said that, they learned about, of course, these mundane meditative absorptions. One reason was that they would practice them themselves. They could practice them. It wasn't absolutely necessary, but it was helpful in some cases. But also to learn about the ability of the mind, the incredible ability of the mind. Now, I'll explain this to you. I didn't put this in writing. I just mentioned it briefly because I thought it was going into a different direction, and that's not the point of this paper. It's just an analogy here. But let me explain this much. If you practice single-pointed meditation, something we have a hard time doing, especially at this day and age, right? Talk about concentration and stuff. But if you practice this intensely, you can achieve what's called calm abiding, right? Even more so, calm abiding and special insight. And special insight doesn't mean that you need to realize emptiness. You can take any object. You can focus on your breath and analyze your breath at the same time with a very calm mind. Now, that ability of calm abiding and special insight, that was not unique to Buddhists. That's a technique that existed before the Buddha came, and the Buddha just instructed his disciples to practice exactly that particular type of meditation. Now, it enables you to focus on a particular object while subtly analyzing it for at least 4 hours. Wow, if we had that kind of concentration, I mean, analyzing anything for 4 hours with such intensity and clarity, incredible. All right, but that's just the beginning. Now, what we need to understand is that our existence is called desire realm. We live in the desire realm. The human realm is part of the desire realm. Well, the celestial, there's a particular celestial realm, it's called the desire realm. All these existences, the preta realm, the animal realm is part of the desire realm. Guess why? Because everything is controlled by desire. Everything is controlled by desire, right? We are born because of desire. Our parents, it was their desire, and most of the time it's afflictive desire, right? We die, when we die in our previous life, there's the strong wish, I want to be reborn. And so you're reborn. So everything basically, never mind. So desire makes the world go round. Not money makes the world go round. It's desire makes, I can say that in Hebrew actually. I think I can still say it. Kesef, something, never mind. So the point is here that desire is the kind of petrol of everything, is the kind of, But when you have these levels of concentration, you can leave the desire realm and be reborn in a level that's called form realm or formless realm. So these are higher levels where you have, first of all, a lot less suffering. And at some point, what we call suffering is no longer experienced. You have only blissful experiences. So at the time of the Buddha, there were many non-Buddhist practitioners who believed these states to be liberation, moksha, or liberation. And they aimed to attain them. So how did they attain them? With afflictive desire? No, you can't get there with that. But they utilized these meditative states of absorption. They figured out that if you have these focused states of mind and you practice in such a way that you focus on the desire realm as coarse, as full of suffering, as undesirable basically, and you focus on the positive aspects of the higher realms, with that subtle analysis and single-pointed focus, you created the causes to be reborn there. You could create the causes to be reborn there. So in other words, you used calm abiding special insight. Your mind became like the little fish moving under, leaving the surface of the mind totally calm, and now focusing on the disadvantages of the desire realm, our realm, and focus at the advantages of, let's say, the first level of the form realm, and when you die, you're reborn there. Right? It is so much better than the desire realm. It's actually so much better. From a point of view of like ordinary, like not from a point of view of the Dharma. No, not from a point of view of the Dharma. The desire realm is good because there's enough suffering. We need suffering to generate renunciation, unfortunately. It's actually a good thing that even as humans, I mean, in the desire realm, you also have a celestial level, and in there's so much bliss and stuff, but the distractions are too great. In the form realm, you're not that as distracted, but it's harder to generate renunciation. But anyway, there were these practitioners that were able to be reborn in these higher realms. So the form realm has 4 levels, and then there's a formless realm that has another 4 levels. So you progress. First, you've achieved the first concentration of the form realm. You can be reborn in the form realm. But you can also, without being reborn there, progress right away to the second concentration of the form realm, and in your next life be reborn there. It's even better. And so you progress. And if you've gone through all 4, you can then meditate on the level of the formless, the first formless realm. That's even better, but not for us. At this level, from our perspective, it's not better because we're so attached to physical objects. But once you reach such a high level, the first 4 levels of the form realm, where you still have physical objects, you regard, at this point, when you've reached the highest of the form realm levels, you regard physical objects as a distraction. Physical objects are a distraction. Our sense, I mean, come on, how distracted are we by our sense consciousnesses? Let's face it. If we didn't have sense consciousnesses, right? If we didn't have sense consciousnesses, we'd be a lot less distracted. So, therefore, once you're on the 4th level of the form realm, you wish to be reborn in the formless realm. No form, just mind. Right now, we're like, oh my God, no breakfast, no dinner, no coffee. Seems terrible. But no, once you reach that level, you've given up on that. I mean, you're not interested. You're interested in that calm, peaceful state of mind. And let's face it, we know that that feels good. That's why so many people are attached to calm abiding, to single-pointed meditation. A lot of people want just to do shamatha. Because the moment you just focus on your breath, you forget about all your mess. You forget about samsara, all your worries and all that. But of course, it's only a short-term solution. It's like taking a painkiller. A bit less side effects, but or without. But it's still like, it's like taking a painkiller. You're just not thinking about it because you're so focused. And that is such a blissful state. Have you ever noticed why we're not happy? Because our mind jumps from here to there, and then there's anger and annoyance, and then there's this attachment. There's no happiness because it's racing back and forth, and there's so many afflictions. If you just focus on the breath, do that a whole day, that's true vacation. Lying on the beach, Feels like you're vacating, but it's not, right? I mean, it does. This is an interesting point. When you leave your home behind, your everyday life, for a few days, it doesn't catch up with you. Have you noticed when you go to a different place, your worries from the old place, you leave them behind for some time. They catch up with you. They just take a little longer to come. So mentally, have you noticed? So the things that worry you usually, but then some new worry arises, that's just the suffering of change. To go to a new place, that's the vacation. So similarly here, these kind of concentrations, they last a little longer. You have these deep states of concentrations, and your samsaric worries, they won't catch up with you that fast, because you'll always be in that meditative state. The moment you're not, if a strong affliction arises, an affliction that is typical for the desire realm, you lose it. You can lose it. But you see the point I'm trying to make? You can actually reach the second highest level of samsara. The second highest level, the third level of the formless realm. But you can't reach the peak of cyclic existence. That you can't go beyond. You can reach, of course, you can reach the peak of cyclic existence. You can be reborn there, but you cannot go beyond. There is no place beyond. Why? Because, oh no, I should put it differently. I said something wrong. There is only 8 levels. There's only the peak of cyclic existence. There's nothing higher. And how do you know? Because you cannot go above it. Why? Because you have to meditate on the disadvantages of peak of cyclic existence, and then all you have left is liberation. But you're not liberated by simply focusing on the disadvantages of the highest level of cyclic existence and focusing on the advantages of liberation. That will not take you to liberation. So you're stuck in peak of existence and you cannot go higher. Does that make sense? This is the highest level possible, according to the kind of mind you can attain through calm abiding. Doesn't get any subtler. And the state above that would be self-liberation, but that's not the way to attain self-liberation. You need to generate wisdom, not just not just calm abiding or concentration. Okay, having said all this, so this passage here, it says, draws an analogy with non-Buddhist Indian practitioners, also referred to as seers, who through mundane meditative absorptions temporarily relinquish attachment to all levels of cyclic existence. So by focusing on the disadvantages of the lower realms, of the desire realm first, and then the first concentration, the first level of the form realm, and so forth, it's temporarily they're able to relinquish attachment because of their concentration to all levels of cyclic existence except the highest. So the highest peak of existence, that attachment they cannot overcome. Right? They can take rebirth in peak of existence, but the type of attachment that is typical for the peak of existence, they cannot overcome unless they become liberated. So, but they can reach all these levels, they can overcome attachment to these different levels except the highest in order to be reborn in those levels of the form or formless realms. Such practitioners view the realms of samsaric existence in terms of gradations of refinement. So they think it's better, at each level they think the highest is better. And then they continue until they can't continue on through this technique any further. They cultivate successive levels of mundane meditative absorption by regarding a lower level, for example, the desire realm, as coarse, and a higher one, such as the first level of the form realm, as peaceful or refined. In this way, they temporarily overcome attachment to the desire realm and are born in the first level of the form realm. And then they temporarily overcome attachment or desire of the form realm, of the first form realm, and are reborn in the second form realm. And then they overcome. And so in that way, they progress. In the same manner, they may then regard the first level of the form realm as coarse and the second level as peaceful, resulting in rebirth in the second level, and so on, through progressively subtler levels, all the way up to the peak of existence. Isn't that incredible? Our mind can do that. And honestly, we've all done it. We've all done it in the past. The Buddha was very clear on that. He said there's not been a state in cyclic existence that we have not been in. We've been in every realm of cyclic existence, and here we are. Come back to the desire realm because we can't stay there for good. Eventually our afflictions will catch up with us, because the afflictions, we haven't removed the potential for them to arise again. The seeds are still there, so we can temporarily suppress them. It's kind of suppressing. It's not totally eliminating them. So temporarily they do not manifest, but eventually you come down again. So Acharya Chandrakirti invokes this analogy to argue that if hearers and solitary realizers did not realize emptiness, they too would inevitably be surpassed in realizations by bodhisattvas on the lower ground, such as the first. So here he's saying, just as these practitioners, they're amazing, those seers, those non-Buddhist practitioners, they're amazing, but they're outshined by a bodhisattva on the first ground who realizes emptiness directly. And if hearers and solitary realizers did not realize emptiness directly, almost done, if they do not realize emptiness directly, then they would also be outshined by a bodhisattva in the same way as these seers would be true. So why is he using this analogy? Just as the seers who rely solely on mundane absorptions and thereby only temporarily overcome attachment to certain levels of cyclic existence, just as they are surpassed by bodhisattvas, so too would hearers and solitary realizers be outshone in terms of wisdom, I should have added that, or would be surpassed in terms of wisdom if they lack the wisdom directly realizing emptiness. So this argument is summarized by some of the commentators with the following logical consequence. This is a logical consequence which constitutes the first of the three reasonings. Okay, take the subject, a hearer or solitary realizer, arhat. It follows that bodhisattvas on the first ground are capable of outshining them in terms of intelligence or in terms of wisdom because they have not attained the realization of the absence of intrinsic existence. So, hearers and solitary realizers haven't realized emptiness. For example, like a non-Buddhist seer who temporarily becomes free of attachment to a particular level of cyclic existence through a mundane path that views that level as coarse and the level above as peaceful. So they are also outshone, they are also surpassed by bodhisattvas because they haven't realized emptiness directly. That's the first reasoning. Okay, and to give you a taste of what's going to come, I'll just read the first bit and then we stop class. The first reasoning, as well as the two that follow, has traditionally been the subject of extensive debate. These discussions revolve primarily around two types of logical statements used in Buddhist logic, a consequence and a syllogism. So next time we do logic. I'll explain what a consequence is, I explain what a syllogism is, and then we're using it. This is, I don't know whether you are that interested in it, but actually, without really understanding it, it's impossible to understand the Prasangika school. It's the consequentialist school. So to get a better sense, and I'm not going into a lot of details, you can read it, it's just a few pages, on the difference between a consequence and a syllogism, just to become, some of you know this already, but just to hear about it, and to then apply what you've learned to the three reasonings. The debates. I'm actually leading you through the debates. That's the main point. Is this a correct consequence or not? And who asserts what? And now you have to practice what do these, and this is really hard actually, but that's what we do, exactly this. You look at the four schools and see, is this a correct consequence for them or not? Are there absurdities here addressed? Right? Are there absurd views, are they addressed or not? So you have to really keep in mind what does each school says, but we do it together. It's not gonna, if you memorize it, it's easier, but never mind. We do it together, and it's such a great training to understand the other schools better and learn to use your mind in such a way you compare. Okay? And it's harder to do it without a text, but you have a text, so, all right. Anyway, There's no question and answer today. Sorry, because I went on for too long in the beginning. Next time, there'll be a time again to ask questions. And I also send you the new material. All right. So let's take a moment thinking whatever positive potential we've accumulated together, however difficult it may seem and it may be, may this become a cause for us to develop more wisdom that in turn also enhances our method, our love and compassion, so that we're eventually able to remove all the obstructions that are not in the nature of our mind to reach the awakened state of a Buddha for the benefit of every single living being. Let's recite the prayers. In the snow-encircled land, you are the source of benefit and bliss. Avalokiteshvara Denzin Gyatso, please remain in life until samsara ends. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. May the precious view of emptiness, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Okay, thank you.